But interestingly enough, before I leave that topic, we're indebted to Michael Crichton for giving us a demonstration of what the technology would be to be required to do this. Because in his classic novel about Jurassic Park, these prehistoric creatures are created with nothing more than a piece of information. It happens to be the DNA that was captured, and they have a mechanism for the plot that does that. But it's interesting, if you realize what's going on there, it's a demonstration of how you could create a prehistoric creature from nothing more than a piece of information. All God needs to resurrect you is your DNA, and maybe a little bit more, but a piece of information. Because the particular atoms he might choose to use are fungible elements anyway to assemble and put together. And I suspect that with some confidence that we're not necessarily going to be built out of hydrocarbon molecules in a resurrection body. In fact, there's some surprises coming. We'll come to that. But the main point is that this transition has to take place. And 1 Corinthians 15 is the chapter that really deals with the whole issue of resurrection. I could argue, I think Paul would argue, that it's probably the most important chapter in the Bible. Because without 1 Corinthians 15, we have nothing. It's the key to it all. But in verse 51, he says, "Behold, I show you a mystery." Now, a mystery in the Greek, the word means something up till now has been hidden and now revealing. They use the term mystery a little differently than we use it. It's more like revealing a password kind of thing. "I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed." Notice the "we" there, by the way. Paul identified himself in this category in some surprising ways, especially even in the second letter we'll come to. "We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality." So this is the transition that's taking place. And this twinkling of an eye, by the way, that's not a blink. A blink's a long period of time. I personally suspect, it's a conjecture on my part, that that's going to be about 10 to the minus 43 seconds, because that's the digital limit. One of the things that we know from today, and I'm not being facetious, I know I usually am, but we live in a digital simulation. One of the great discoveries of quantum physics is that length, mass, energy, time, almost anything we can engage in this universe is composed of indivisible units. You would think that length, no matter what you have, you can cut it in half, and whatever you got left, you can cut in half again. You can do that forever, at least conceptually. No, you can't. Get down to 10 to the minus 35 centimeters, if you try to split that in half, it no longer has locality. It becomes immediately connected to everything else in the universe. The proving of non-locality by Alan Aspect and those guys back in 1982 shocked the physics world. On the macrocosm, the universe is finite. It's a big discovery of 20th century science. On the microcosm, whether it's mass, time, whatever, it's made up of indivisible units. The smallest unit of time is 10 to the minus 43 seconds. Smaller than that does not exist. It's digital. And that's profoundly significant. The point is, that's why I suspect that's probably the unit of time, because the twinkling of an eye was at the speed of light. How long does it take you to go through the iris? About that. So anyway, let's move on. The climax then is, the next verse says, "So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?" Now, the physics of immortality, we have a briefing pack on that, so if I want to just extract a couple of things you might find interesting. The first thing that fascinates me is the dimensionality issue. We know that Jesus Christ, in his physical body along the Sea of Galilee, he was a three-dimensional body. He could handle him, see, he ate, and he was familiar. But we also know that after his resurrection, he had some very unusual properties. He could enter and leave a room without passing through the walls, floor, or ceiling. We think of a cube as having 6 sides, but he could enter and leave without passing through any of those 6 sides. Now, if you're a mathematician, you can deal with this because we're dealing with hyperspaces. There's only 2 kinds of people who can deal with hyperspaces. That's mathematicians with special training and small children. But you and I probably have difficulty with that. Where this comes up, see, some people speculate that Jesus people who are expert in this area tend to conjecture that Jesus had to have at least 11 dimensions in order to accomplish what he accomplishes. Now, you and I can't relate that without some mathematics. I won't get into that here. But the point is we need to understand we're dealing here in spaces of more than the 3 dimensions. And 1 John 3:2 has a fascinating verse. In 1 John 3:2, he writes, "Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is." Now that sounds like double talk at first, and yet what he's saying in effect, see, you and I, when we look at, say, a set of drawings for a house, we look at a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional house. And when you look at a painting, that's an artist's 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional space. What he's saying, see what he's really saying here, we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. We're not going to see a 3-dimensional representation of a 4-dimensional being or a 5-dimensional representation of a 6-dimensional being. Whatever it is, we'll be like him because we're going to see him as he is. See, the only way you can get a 3-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional person is to be a 3-dimensional person with him. You follow me? That's what he's saying. So whatever he is, whatever it is, we shall be like him because we shall see him as he is. When will we do that? When he shall appear. That's exciting. That's exciting. Now, in 2 Corinthians 5, there's a passage that's often overlooked by people who are in this rapture issue that came up in our studies when we were investigating Genesis 6, and I'm indebted to Tommy Ice's recent newsletter who highlights something else. So we've got something to trade here, kind of interesting. Anyway, in 2 Corinthians 5, first verse says, "For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. And for in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house which is from heaven." Now, it's in the Greek that this has some subtleties we want to be sensitive to. For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle, he's using here the idiom of a tent for our temporary dwellings. Why? Because a tent is typically considered a temporary dwelling for camping, whatever. You and I are in our temporary dwellings that serves us for a period of, 70 or whatever. We know that if our earthly house of this tent were dissolved, we have a building of God, a building of God. He's shifting to a more permanent idiom here. A house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. You know, one thing, let me just insert this too. You know, most of us tend to think of this as, look at this podium or our physical universe as being real, and we tend to think of the spiritual universe as sort of ephemeral, invisible, sort of a fuzzy neverland kind of thing. It's the other way around. This podium is a simulation. It's an electrical simulation. It only feels solid. There's more space than solid here if you really understand the atomic structure. It's the real universe that's real. This is a simulation of sorts. But anyway, he goes on then, "For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house, which is from heaven." Now, the word house here is an interesting word. In the Greek, it's okaterion, and it's interesting because it only occurs twice in the Bible. Once here, as referring to that which we aspire to in our resurrection bodies. The only other place it shows up is in Jude 6. And there, it's a strange allusion. In Jude 6, he's talking about the bizarre goings-on of Genesis 6. "And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, hath he reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day." He's referring to the judgment of those angels that generated the Nephilim in Genesis 6. And what's interesting is this first estate, the word is arche, which means principality or majesty of either angels or demons. They left that. They kept not their first estate, but they left their own habitation. The word habitation there again is okaterion, this dwelling that they disrobed themselves of to engage in this mischief in Genesis 6. It's the same word that describes that body that we aspire to in our resurrection bodies that will be instantly given to us at the rapture. In fact, see the next verse. It's interesting. Paul reveals something here in the third verse of 2 Corinthians 5. He says, Let me take verse 2 first. For in this we groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed upon with our house which is from heaven, if so be that being clothed